Hi,
Oh,
Adam.
hey, hello again. How you doing?
I'm here
Oh,
too
I can see.
today in
Lovely,
in my husband's mess of a studio. But
fantastic. I'm not gonna turn my camera around. I've got you pointed at the tidy area at
smart.
the moment.
This is the chaos. Um,
Wow, what
but
what is that hanging in the background? Is that a skeleton?
oh, it's Alien. Hold on. Can I get him? There he is.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, that was I think Joseph's midlife crisis acquisition a couple of years ago. It's but 8 feet tall, and so here I'll swap over really quick to show you guys because it's really something.
Must get unnerving when you're working late at night.
You know, we're okay with it, but in our last house, the alien sculpture was in our living room where, because we didn't have guest rooms, if we ever had anybody stay over, they would stay there. And so
It's
that was always a
freaky,
bit freaky for
like
them.
right next to the bed when the other person's asleep.
Yep, that's where he was. So, but now he lives in Joseph's studio. And so he doesn't scare anybody here. So let's now turn to the works we have. Side of my face. Okay, so for everyone joining in, here's Adam Oehlers. We spoke, I think, maybe a week ago as an introduction to what was coming. This is part of his exhibition, Thistledown. The other pieces are with Adam. And so,
Let's see.
yeah, both him and I will be showing you guys the works today.
What's
Oh,
it
look
made
at
out?
them. It's so sad that we can't have them here.
I know, but at least we can bring them together like this, eh?
Yes, it's such a good point. We're very fortunate to have this kind of technology to do so, and we'll be going through all these works today, focusing on a couple. Many have already found homes, which means that those that are with Adam, I will never get to meet, and that's quite sad. But I've been very fortunate to work with Adam since we've been open, and so a number of really wonderful pieces have come through the doors of Haven, and so we're just happy that they're being spoken for and that the arts are continually supported even during difficult times such as this. So
Oh, it's amazing, isn't it?
yeah, it's amazing. So if you guys, as usual, have questions, always throw them out as we speak. We'll get to them as soon as we finish whatever it is that we're talking about at that moment. And so we have what is an exhibition of a couple different mediums of Adam's work. So we have shadow boxes, and Adam will show you those on his end when we get there. We have works that are just ink. You guys can see here. Stay with me. Exemplifies incredible detail. And we have the watercolor and ink pieces as well that have some graphite in them too. And so we'll focus on all of these works today. And yeah, so let's begin with one of my favorites, Watcher in the Oak. I actually had asked Adam if he would do an owl for us because we're quite partial to them, and he always just does such a beautiful job. So tell us more about this character. Who is he? Why does he have his antler horns and palette? Everything you can give us on.
I would never hesitate to draw an owl. I absolutely love owls. They're a big part of the time that I had living in the countryside. The kind of woodland walks we'd see them flying around. Beautiful white owls as well. But this little fella, he's a tawny. And the idea behind him, with the antlers, it's that subtle magic that I'm drawn to, really. I love all nature and these kind of animals, but then to have just this simple little addition to them, which suddenly changes the character of the creature so much, and in a way makes it a little bit more ancient and a little bit more timeless and a little bit more foreign to us. Which is what drew me to the antlered owl. Really, it's just that kind of unusual magic that to me doesn't seem that out of place, if that makes sense.
No, it absolutely does. And owls sort of have that naturally as it is. So this almost takes it to the next level where he's chimeric with his other features. And so
Yeah,
he could be of this world or he could be of another.
yeah, absolutely. I like to think that he's sitting in the tree outside, though.
Just watching over all of us
You
like a
know,
guardian.
unseen. He's there and he's watching, but he's unseen.
So you guys can see Adam's palette and all the little details and how beautiful the subtlety of color is here. And those feathers.
Originally with this chap, you can see the broken branch which is tangled in his antler. Um, so originally this was going to be the only branch that was had the more autumnal tones and the kind of dying leaves, as it's been caught up in his antlers as he's been working his way through the tree. Um, I started working on it from the top down as I often do. And by the time I got halfway down, I loved the contrast between these autumnal leaves and the fresh leaves. So that's why I've added in that branch at the bottom, which is totally autumnal as well. Um, there you go. Yeah, backed by the living branches. So
And I think it just creates that sense of depth and really sets him up high in the tree where, there's a lot more going to the story than what we see. Who knows how far that tree branches out and what other animals may lurk in there. And so it continuously tells that story.
Erica, do you remember my piece from the Wilderlands, Ask the Oak?
Yes, yes, a tree with the face.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. So, I believe that this is his companion, and
Oh,
he lives in his branches.
I can see
Um,
that for sure.
yeah, so I kind of, I mean, in that piece, he's depicted with robins flying around, but I often kind of when I'm working on pieces, I'll often kind of just build on stories basically, and I think this the Watcher is definitely he's definitely paired with that oak tree because I feel like they I feel like they'd just be quite good together really. The idea of the oak character in the last piece was he's quite a silent wise old man. He only
Yeah.
really says anything if there's anything worth saying. Um, and this Watcher, this owl, he's a completely silent. To me, he's completely silent. He just watches, and the idea of the two of them just hanging out is quite pleasant to me because there wouldn't be much said, but they'd be enjoying each other's company nonetheless.
I hope that collector gets to watch this at some point. I haven't heard from him actually after it sent out your preview, so perhaps now knowing this, I will follow up
Oh,
specifically and let
really?
him know that connection because it's quite wonderful. And I'm sure if he likes owls, he would appreciate having the two together.
Yeah, oh, lovely.
Yeah,
Lovely.
well, sure.
There's a few in this collection that kind of either pair with each other. Obviously, with the Stranger's Tale pieces, all of them belong together, but there are pieces within that collection that to me belong together. Yeah, there's like I said, there's just often one story or one little idea will lead on to another. So they very much belong to the same world to me when that happens.
Hi, Adam.
Oh, hey, hello again. How you doing?
I'm here
Oh,
too
I can see.
today. in
Lovely.
in my husband's mess of a studio. But
Fantastic. I'm not going to turn my camera around. I've got you pointed at the tidy area of mine.
smart. This is the chaos.
Wow,
But
what is that hanging in the background? Is that a skeleton?
oh, it's Alien. Hold on. Can I get him? There he is.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, that was I think Joseph's midlife crisis acquisition a couple of years ago. It's but 8 feet tall, and so here I'll swap over really quick to show you guys because it's really something.
Must get unnerving when you're working late at night.
We're okay with it, but in our last house, the alien sculpture was in our living room where, because we didn't have guest rooms, if we ever had anybody stay over, they would stay there. And so that was always a bit freaky for them.
Like right next to the bed when the other person's asleep.
Yep. That's what he was. So, but now he lives in Joseph's studio, and so he doesn't scare anybody here. So let's now turn to the works we have. Side of my face. Okay, so for everyone joining in, here's Adam Oehlers. We spoke, I think, maybe a week ago as an introduction to what was coming. This is part of his exhibition, Thistledown. The other pieces are with Adam. And so, yeah, both him and I will be showing you guys the works today. Oh, look at them. It's so sad that we can't have them here.
I know, but at least we can bring them together like this, eh?
Yes, it's such a good point. We're very fortunate to have this kind of technology to do so, and we'll be going through all these works today, focusing on a couple. Many have already found homes, which means that those that are with Adam, I will never get to meet, and that's quite sad. But I've been very fortunate to work with Adam since we've been open, and so a number of really wonderful pieces have come through the doors of Haven, and so we're just happy that they're being spoken for and that the arts are continually supported even during difficult times such as this. So
Oh, it's amazing, isn't it?
yeah, it's amazing. So if you guys, as usual, have questions, always throw them out as we speak. We'll get to them as soon as we finish whatever it is that we're talking about at that moment. And so we have what is an exhibition of a couple different mediums of Adam's work. So we have shadow boxes, and Adam will show you those on his end when we get there. We have works that are just ink. You guys can see here. Stay with me. Exemplifies incredible detail. And we have the watercolor and ink pieces as well that have some graphite in them too. And so we'll focus on all of these works today. And yeah, so let's begin with one of my favorites, Watcher in the Oak. I actually had asked Adam if he would do an owl for us because we're quite partial to them, and he always just does such a beautiful job. So tell us more about this character. Who is he? Why does he have his antler horns and palette? Everything you can give us on.
I would never hesitate to draw an owl. I absolutely love owls. They're a big part of the time that I had living in the countryside. The kind of woodland walks we'd see them flying around. Beautiful white owls as well. But this little fella, he's a tawny, and the idea behind him with the antlers, it's that kind of it's that subtle magic that I'm drawn to. Really, I love all nature and these kind of animals, but then to have just this simple little addition to them, which suddenly changes the character of the creature so much, and in a way makes it a little bit more ancient and a little bit more timeless and a little bit more foreign to us. Which is what drew me to the antlered owl. Really, it's just that kind of unusual magic that to me doesn't seem that out of place, if that makes sense.
No, it absolutely does. And owls sort of have that naturally as it is. So this almost takes it to the next level where he's chimeric with his other features. And so
Yeah,
he could be of this world or he could be of another.
yeah, absolutely. I like to think that he's sitting in the tree outside, though.
Just watching over all of us like a guardian.
Unseen. He's there and he's watching, but he's unseen.
So you guys can see Adam's palette and all the little details and how beautiful the subtlety of color is here. And those feathers.
Originally, with this chap, you can see the broken branch which is tangled in his antler. So originally, this was going to be the only branch that had the more autumnal tones and the kind of dying leaves, as it's been caught up in his antlers as he's been working his way through the tree. I started working on it from the top down, as I often do. And by the time I got halfway down, I loved the contrast between these autumnal leaves and the fresh leaves. So that's why I've added in that branch at the bottom, which is totally autumnal as well. There you go. Yeah. Backed by the living branches. So
Yeah, I think it just creates that sense of depth and really sets him up high in the tree where, there's a lot more going to the story than what we see. Who knows how far that tree branches out and what other animals may lurk in there. And so it continuously tells that story.
Erica, do you remember my piece from the Wilderlands, Ask the Oak?
Yes, yes, a tree with the face.
Yes,
Yes.
yeah. So, I believe that this is his companion, and
Ah,
he lives in his branches.
I can see
Um,
that for sure.
yeah, so I kind of, I mean, in that piece, he's depicted with robins flying around, but I often kind of when I'm working on pieces, I'll often kind of just build on stories basically, and I think this the Watcher is definitely he's definitely paired with that oak tree because I feel like they I feel like they'd just be quite good together really. The idea of the oak character in the last piece was you know he's quite a silent wise old man. He only
Yeah.
really says anything if there's anything worth saying. Um, and this Watcher, this owl, he's a completely silent. To me, he's completely silent. He just watches, and the idea of the two of them just hanging out is quite pleasant to me because there wouldn't be much said, but they'd be enjoying each other's company nonetheless.
I hope that collector gets to watch this at some point. I haven't heard from him actually after it sent out your preview, so perhaps now knowing this, I will follow up
Oh,
specifically and let
really?
him know that connection because it's quite wonderful. And I'm sure if he likes owls, he would appreciate having the two together.
Yeah, oh, lovely.
Yeah,
Lovely.
well, for sure.
There's a few in this collection that kind of either pair with each other. Obviously, with the Stranger's Tale pieces, all of them belong together, but there are pieces within that collection that to me belong together. Yeah, like I said, there's just often one story or one little idea will lead on to another. So they very much belong to the same world to me when that happens, or the same story. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that, the works are kind of part of this total Adam Oehlers universe, even if they are specific to a publication or a music video or an outside endeavor where you're not completing 100% personal work. They all just
Yeah.
kind of tie together into that one unique world, and it's
I like the idea of each of them happening around the corner from the other,
yeah,
or within the woodland, or you know, you could possibly encounter a few of them on one walk through the countryside. You know.
absolutely. And so, just a couple questions popped up. So I guess we'll get to the questions and then we'll continue going.
Yeah.
I know, let me see. Someone had asked, sorry, it's a bit up further. How long have you been doing art?
Oh right. Yeah, we've done. I think I covered this a little bit in our last chat, and I
Yep.
probably rambled on a bit, so I'll keep it short and sweet for you. Just always, absolutely always. Can't remember a time that I wasn't really.
Yeah.
I mean, I had friends when I was a kid. I remember even of 8 or 9. I had friends who were also into drawing and also to art. I remember having them around, and we'd sit with massive bits of paper and just draw for hours, really, and create scenes together and stuff. So yeah, all the way back, really. There's no starting point, really. It's
In
just
the
always been.
womb, even you were just kind of somehow moving your finger around, perhaps.
Harder to get your hands on materials there, though. But
At least it's just your imagination, I suppose. And so the same person also asked where you went to school.
where I went to school, I went to school in well, high school and a lot of primary school. I went in South Australia in Adelaide. I went to Blackwood High, and I did my uni studies in Adelaide as well. And then when I finished uni, I headed back over to the UK. So, and I did a bit of schooling in Ireland, but not much. I was very young before we moved out to Australia. So, yeah.
Our next question. I'm not sure if this is pertaining to the medium or the specifics of it, but they want to know the tools that you used for this piece. I'm not sure if you mean the pieces in full or a specific one. So if you can just specify if it was a
Yeah, I
specific
mean,
piece.
I can cover them all really because I don't mix it up that much as far as my mediums go. So it's watercolor washes with pen and pencil shading. And for the deep black that you can see around the Watcher, that would be Staedtler markers that I use. So I use Staedtler pens, Staedtler markers, watercolors, pencils. Yeah, pretty traditional stuff, I think.
And then, of course, when you get into the shadow boxes, you use some kind of scalpel tools and knives, X-Acto blades. Would you say? Oh,
Sorry, say that again?
sorry, I think I cut over you. With the shadow boxes too, it goes one step further as you bring in blades like scalpels or X-Acto knives and things like that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's a scalpel that I use most of the time, just because I get along with them a bit better. But yeah, yeah. And that's always a bit nerve-wracking as well, having
Yeah,
to them. But it's all part of it, isn't it? So,
it is. They're dangerous tools. People
yeah.
don't realize the lengths artists go sometimes to getting that work complete.
Oh yeah, the spilt blood.
Yeah. Could with its oxidation be quite autumnal and antiqued and perhaps even blend into certain works if it had to, I'm sure. But
Yeah,
that's,
yeah.
I
You
guess
can
that's
always work.
morbid.
That's the great thing about using watercolor, isn't it? It'll just kind of
I
become piece of
mean,
art.
there are artists who use blood to paint with, so it is possible should
Yeah,
the accident ever arise, I suppose. But I don't think anybody would know unless we, of course, told them. So,
yeah.
and here's Nam. She says, Nova says, your pictures are amazing, Daddy.
Thanks. I think all of them are watching from the attic. Hi, guys.
Oh, hi, Nam. Hi, everybody. And so, the next question that popped up was from Hope, who is one of the artists that we work with. And she had asked if you have any pets. Did you have any pets growing up?
Yeah, I didn't come from a very pet-heavy family, actually. There was a lot of us, that's probably why. But when I was growing up in Ireland, I remember one Easter that my brother Alan, hey Al, if you're watching,
Oh,
um, my brother Alan bought me and my sister some rabbits for Easter.
oh. So we,
We had for a while we had two rabbits, Butch and Sundance, and then we moved to Australia. So we never had any pets after Australia.
and what about now? Do you guys have any pets?
I've got a fish. I've got a
Oh,
goldfish. But that's it. Again, yeah, three kids. Does that
yeah,
count?
yeah. I was gonna say you guys already probably have your hands full.
I think when the kids get a little bit older, and I know Nova and Vida are watching this at the moment, go yes, we want something.
Oh,
When everyone's a bit older, we'll probably get something. I'm
for
sure.
sure. I think so. And you guys live out in the woods a bit, right? There's a lot of nature by you anyway, so you probably often get
We
visited
did for
by.
a long time, but we're in the city. We're in the city
Oh, you're in
now.
the city now. I thought
We
you
are,
guys.
but
Huh.
it's no, we're in Norwich, but within Norwich, there's a woods called Mousehold Woods, which is massive, kind of quite central, and that's only a 5 minute walk from us. But then Norwich is a small city as well, so it doesn't take much for us to get out
So
to the
you're so
countryside.
close. That's probably why I thought so. And it sounds very country to me. I don't know why.
Yeah,
I must have just assumed that. Sorry about that.
it's probably
Um,
because I've told you that we live like hobbits, but
yeah, I think that's the way to live, honestly. Outside of going to the gallery and having my daily experience there, I don't like going anywhere else. So
yeah.
I'm with you. The woods are just fine for me. So
Not
another
just not
question.
interrupted and said you'd probably call where we live a town in America.
Yeah, all right, that makes sense. I think that paints a clearer picture for all of us because we're in a town too, and we have a main street, but we also have plenty of beaches and woods and nature-filled spaces.
Yeah.
And so we have a question specifically about how you paint mist and wind. So I think this one, particularly the north wind, was specified. She wants to know how you go about painting that.
Okay, so some of my pieces are much more heavy on pen than others, and some of them are much more heavy on pencil. So as far as the technique behind the North Wind, I'd sketch out the concept and I'd get it all penciled out first. Hang on a second.
Do we have
Uh,
visitors?
Monkey's just
Oh
come
my
in.
gosh! Look how
We've
happy
just
he
kicked the
is.
door open then.
The Did not just drop him off and run off?
That was a little bit spooky actually, because where I was sitting, I couldn't see, and the door just swung open. Anyway,
He crawled over.
so yeah, I'll sketch it out like any piece to begin with, and get the composition down and stuff, and then I'll work the watercolor like I do everything else. And those shapes that you see of the wind, they're all sketched in pencil first, and then I start on the watercolor, and I'll just build it up and up and up with a very, very light wash, really heavy on the water. Then I'll let it dry, and I'll do another layer, and then I'll do another layer until I've got it how I like it. And then once all that watercolor's down and dry, then I'll start with the pen work. And so the details you can see kind of coming in behind the tree, behind the mist, the tree, for instance, and the other bits. Some of that shading is done just with pencil, and some of the more prominent stuff is done with pens. So you get a feel for it, which foreground bits are going to be jumping out a bit more through the mist. So those ones will be soft kind of pen cross hatching, and then the rest of it will be lighter pencil shading, creating the shapes. I can also make the shapes with added bits of watercolor as well. If I feel like something needs to be a bit more prominent, I'll add another bit of watercolor and stuff. And then, as you can see with the stranger standing there against the tree, that's all really heavy pen shading to make him pop. And then his pen shading bleeds into that mist that's coming off his cloak. Yeah. This piece was an absolute dream to work on, but it was really fiddly. So the description of this scene in the story, the North Wind presents the stranger with this cape, which is made out of the wind and forms around him, and this it's got a wolf head on it, and it all appears on him through the wind. So it was to get that movement. You can see there where the cape kind of disappears into the wind. To get that movement was quite tricky, but also really satisfying to work on. Really, that kind of shading where you can just vanish it away it's really lovely to do. I hope I've answered your question.
No, I think that was great. I think it gives that insight, and it really is such a beautiful transition. I mean, you have the values playing with that ink, as you guys can see with that cross hatching, as Adam mentioned, but the watercolor can be so much lighter.
Can I show a piece on my end as well?
Yeah, let's see.
So you're looking at the North Wind, and this black and white we've got here. This is like the sister piece, I'd say, to the North Wind. So in the book, the chapter where the North Wind arrives and meets the stranger, this piece introduces that section of the story. So initially, the stranger's walking through the woods, and he hears the North Wind before he sees it. And Natasha's description is just so beautiful of the sound of the North Wind being these horses that are charging through the trees. And that was just that was a piece of imagery I just couldn't let sit. I had to create something for that. So this piece, Charging, almost is an introduction to the North Wind piece.
Yeah. I haven't read the book yet, but I promise I will. I'm looking really forward to it, especially after talking to Natasha myself through email about this collection.
Oh, really? Nice. Lovely.
She's been so wonderful and so inspiring herself. But one of my favorite bits of conversation when she told me you and her were talking and designing the characters was how she had mentioned that the stranger should have a feel of Aragorn from Lord of the Rings.
Yes, yeah.
I love that because I especially love the stranger character. If you did notice when we spoke about the works coming in, he seemed to be in quite a few pieces that I thought would be nice for the show, and I thought so because he, for me, also resembled and reminded me of Aragorn from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, well, that was the only briefing she gave me of the character. Here he is again for you. This piece is Stepping into Spring.
Yep.
And Erica, if you go back to the stranger, there he is. Yeah. So to me, these two sit quite nicely together as well. This is obviously the stranger is the introduction. That's where we meet the character. We see the pathways that he has to choose from. Stepping into Spring is further on in the story. He has left the North Wind, and you can see his cape here and the wolf hanging off it. And he's leaving the cold winter part of the world. If you can make out in the top corner there, can you see the raven
Let me
in the
see.
background?
Yep, I see him.
And you can see some icicles hanging off the branches there as well. So that's the stepping into spring. He's leaving the cold dark behind, and he's stepping into this flowering stream and the light basically. So yeah, so really, this was a really lovely challenge for these pieces. Was getting this level of storytelling into a piece of this scale. If I could just put my pen there for you. So it's really quite. It was really quite interesting, quite. It was, yeah, quite a challenge and quite lovely to work on to bring it all back. Bring it all back to these tiny little pieces, which is how I worked a lot as when I was younger, actually, because I'd always be kind of doodling away in a little sketchbook during class when I was at school or whatnot. So that led to really tiny, more detailed pieces, and it was a really lovely step back for me. And the black and white as well. The black and white is something that I used to always focus on. In fact, I think there must have been about 5 years where I didn't touch color. It was all cross hatching in black and white. But then I kind of I started adding my watercolor washes, and my color work kind of grew and grew until I kind of forgot about black and white. So working with Tash on this, it was really quite a treat to go back to it, and because I think it was really perfect for the story as well. The black and whites have a real classic feel to them to me.
I think so
And
too.
the story itself is a really classic fairy tale kind of folklore. So it just seemed right to have some of the black and whites in there. So it was really
Absolutely.
fun.
I think they truly feel like etchings or some method of old printmaking that you would find in a book from ages ago. And although your work
Yeah.
always has that, I think using that black and white palette exemplifies that even more.
Yeah, I think we covered this last time we spoke, Erica, about my to-do list and things that I want to learn. Etching is very high on the list,
Oh yeah,
and printmaking. That's I'd say quite close to the top actually.
it's
It's like a very natural step to go into etching.
absolutely, and I think that you would take to it extremely well because of the cross-hatching methodologies that you imply anyway through the work.
Yeah.
So funny enough, Calvin, who has a show that opened yesterday alongside you, he also works with ink, although quite differently, but he does use a lot of cross hatching as well. And
Is
he's
this the printmaker, the etchings that you've been showing?
yeah, so they're not etchings; they're deeply inspired by etchings, and I think he'd also be a
Oh, I
wonderful
thought they were
artist
awesome. They're
too. So
absolutely
I know.
incredible. I was checking them out last night. They're amazing.
Yeah, they're so cool. He and you, I had wanted to hang together in the space because I felt like, although image-wise, they're quite different,
Yeah,
they
I mean,
still,
I'd actually like to hang with him in a space as well and chat to him because his work
yeah.
is incredible.
Well, I hope you guys both come back and do more with us. So that's the plan for the future. We can always schedule that accordingly, but
Yeah,
they're beautiful together. If I had any in here, I'd put them side by side. But I mean, you
yeah,
both have a lot of heavy nature involved in your pieces, and that technique, you guys, there's similarities, but there's such differences too that they're wonderful parallels together. And so let's see, another question from Hope again. Thank you, Hope. I know it's late by you. She's in Japan. She says,
Oh wow.
I can't remember if you said this before or not, but did you like books growing up? And if so, what books inspired you the most?
I did, yes. I've always loved books and I've always loved stories. I think it's pretty clear that kind of classic fairy tales, Grimm's and Anderson and stuff like that. My favorite books. I mean, I'm a big fantasy fan actually. Like Tolkien was a massive part of my childhood.
Sorry, I tripped.
Oh,
Ignore.
that's all right.
We
There
have a
you
lot of
go.
art supplies and weights all over here too.
So Tolkien was a massive part. I'm a huge fan of Neil Gaiman. Though not kind of very prominent in the work that I create. I feel like his storytelling methods are just fantastic. Um, yeah, it's when you put on the spot, it's so hard to think of stuff. But
I
yes,
know.
loads and loads of books, so many. Alice in Wonderland, all the classics.
There's just so many.
Yeah,
It's
but yeah,
always,
I think you can by looking at these pieces, you can get a pretty good feel for what I was into.
I think so. And one of the many cool parts about being able to, get to know you as an artist, but also collectors and other artists, so many of them all kind of have those same loves for those stories, as well as other aspects like, perhaps like anime or other fantastical stories or creative endeavors. But it's just awesome because it's connecting you with people throughout without words. So it's the art and it's the stories you tell and the characters you build that have just pulled from years upon years of reading those books and watching those shows and movies, that now those who are also connecting with those just connect so easily and so strongly with your work.
Yeah, and the themes within those stories and the magic and the kind of fantasy elements will seep into your own brain. And when
Yeah,
you're wandering through the wilderness, or when you look at certain things, you're going to see them with a certain twist on them, aren't you? And I think
absolutely.
that's where it comes from.
Yep, definitely for sure. So let's talk a little bit about your shadow boxes. It's so hard for people who haven't seen them in person, or shadow boxes in general in person, to truly understand the depth and the layers and the technique that they involve. So I know that the ones that you have aren't framed yet, as we discussed last time. We're just waiting for the world to open back up so artwork can
Okay.
be framed.
And unfortunately, there's one which is kind of stranded at the moment. My piece Tempest is at the framers, which is closed. So,
How appropriate, because she's stranded on the high seas and she's
yeah,
stranded at the framer.
that's fantastic. So, anyone who hasn't checked out the Haven Gallery site, Tempest is on there. So there's angle shots and stuff of it. So I've got three here. Let me flick you guys around again. Uh, so this is the piece you saw me put together last time we chatted. This is Metamorphosis, my most recent shadow box. Now, so this isn't in depth here. You can see this is just sitting each bit of paper on top of the next. Generally, there will be about 1.5 inches between the layers. I'm sorry that I haven't put it together for this video actually.
No, but
But I've got
it's cool to
here.
see you pull it apart because it shows people all those layers that you've created.
Yeah. Well, tell you what, I'll take it apart completely.
And we'll put it back together.
I'll put it back together for you. So this piece is, what was this one? Was this 10 layers? Let me put that over there. Okay, so this is what I showed you last time. So from layer to layer, we've got a very simple, a little bit of wave at the top there and a watercolor wash at the bottom. Then the next layer, you've just got an extra bit of wave. And I've made sure that when it overlaps, so this will sit about that distance apart. So when you overlap, you won't see any of the white paper kind of poking through. Here's the next one. So getting a bit heavier on the detail of the waves there, and then the first layer of undercurrents coming through at the bottom here. Okay, next. I feel like we're rehashing a bit what we did last time.
I know. The same thing happened with Calvin yesterday.
Doing it a lot quicker. That's all. You can see it getting a bit fuller as I go. So that's the first layer of the heron popping out there. And when there's the depth to these, and you're standing in front of it, and you just kind of sway a little bit in front of the frame, you get a real sense of movement between each of the layers.
Absolutely. And each layer casts a bit of a shadow from behind, so that
So if I hold
enhances the
this one
depth.
up here, you see it will sit about that far, and it creates a really lovely shadow.
Yeah,
And then if I hold the second one up for you, you can see the movement between the beak and the wing. So that will be
absolutely.
happening. That kind of movement will be happening across the entire piece, especially the waves and the undercurrents. Hang on, I'll just put the last piece on for you. There
If
you
you can just
go.
tap your, oh, there we go. Okay. It was a bit out of focus for a moment.
Oh, sorry, that's because I'm moving it around a
No
lot. I'm
worries. No, I know.
forgetting to focus on the camera while I'm focusing on
It's
the.
hard.
Okay, and then the mount just sits on top. So in between each layer would be about 3 or 4 mounts. Sometimes there'll be about a centimeter between each layer. So the depth really does come in. You can make up a bit of shadows across here when it's just sat on top of each other. So down here you've got these layers of undercurrent. Can you see? Can you make that out?
Yep, I
Uh,
can see it here.
and then up here, you've got the waves working their way into the background. So when it's all put together, and if you could, guys, check out this piece on the Haven Gallery site because it's photographed properly on there from a few different angles, and you can really get a much better sense of the depth of it than what you're going to get from this. Also, the tones on video. I really don't like looking at the tones on a video.
I know. It's
But,
in everyone's own
check
homes,
out
the
the site
lighting's
and
so
you'll get a
different.
better idea. But the thing that really that I really enjoyed about this piece was the depth really comes in 2 places. So down here in the under the water and up here the waves at the top, uh, both down here and up there, it works its way into the background. So the central focus really comes out of the middle of the piece, which it kind of sweeps across like this,
Yes,
which when you see it layered, I think has a really lovely effect. Um,
absolutely.
yeah.
And so we'll
So
also do our best to put videos up on our page, as well as Adam will, I'm sure, of the shadow boxes too. So,
absolutely, I'll be posting videos
yeah,
like this one, moving around it, but with the added depth of the
yeah.
waves.
And
Sorry if
so,
the camera's a bit shaky on my end, guys.
no, it's so hard to hold these phones. I have been trying to find a good tripod for a while now, but even if you still have to move around. So
Yeah, absolutely.
now, Metamorphosis, what does that represent as a title to you?
To me, right. So I have I've always been quite fascinated by the idea of a landscape. I'm just going to flip back to me here.
Yeah,
It's easier to hold the phone like this. I've always been quite fascinated by the idea of a landscape that kind of claims creatures or people as its own. Um, like so, this heron originally, I was picturing it as the fish is transforming into a heron as it breaches the surface of the water, and its fins turn into wings and it flies off. So when it's in the water, it becomes fish. When it hits the air, it becomes heron. So it's a creature that can um, travel between both elements. But the more I got working on it, and I don't know if this is the kind of darker sense of my storytelling coming through, uh, the more I got thinking about it was that this heron was almost being pulled under by these currents, and as it's pulled under, it's becoming this fish, this underwater creature. Um, and in that sense, it speaks to that idea of the landscape claiming things for its own. So the heron is still alive and well. It's just got to live in a completely foreign and new and learn how to survive in this new world. Basically, I'll show you again.
it's quite
But
relevant
I
to
really
now
think
and
it
our
can be.
need as humans
I
to
really
adapt
think
to
it can be
changing
viewed in both
experiences.
ways. Really, it can be viewed in both ways as an escape or as an entrapment.
I mean, all living things must evolve to survive the changes of the world. So it's quite hopeful in that regard too, because the heron will persevere and it will find
Oh,
its way
absolutely.
to,
Well, either way it does, doesn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
But it's also, I think, my thoughts on that also come from the piece itself. I mean, there isn't any differentiation between the water and the air in this piece. I mean, you can see the top of the waves and stuff, but it's all water, and there is definitely air here, but it all kind of just blends together.
Yep.
So I mean, in a way, it's one and the same, isn't it?
It's that aerial perspective, whereas in other cases you might have more of a head-on approach in the view.
Oh yeah,
But this adds more, I think, of a tumultuous and active story because now you don't see anything but what's actually going on in that action taking place.
yeah,
He's quite
yeah.
wonderful. Look at him and his tail down there as he evolves.
Oh, and there's the bubbles that are
Yep.
trailing off the tail are built across 4 layers, I think.
Yeah, those bubbles
So
are really great. I was noticing them before and how some of them are just painstakingly cut out.
let me just, sorry, I know I've gone a bit blurry again, but there we go. So you can see, oh, can you see that?
Oh, yeah, that looks great. It just adds so much more movement.
Yeah. So yeah, there we go. Metamorphosis.
So, Hope asked about your process and if you plan all these shadow boxes in Photoshop prior.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yep, sure. Hope, she had also asked if you planned all these in Photoshop.
In Photoshop?
Mhm.
No, 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 no. I'm a bit more traditional than that. It's all sketches and pencil and paper. I'll plan it all out as a sketch, and then from that sketch, I'll determine what aspects need to go on what layers, where everything needs to be, and then yeah, start from the first layer and head backwards into the frame basically. So um, yeah, yeah, no Photoshop.
Yeah. Yeah, using shadow boxes as a medium is just it takes a special way of thinking and one that I'm sure also takes time to kind of really nail down because you have to think backwards as well as forwards.
Oh, absolutely, and I think anyone who produces a shadow box is probably going to approach it in a different way as well.
Definitely.
You find a way that works for you,
Yeah,
and then you kind of build on it. And I think that there's some wonderful pieces out there that I've seen that with the way that I do it might not work, but they found their own way to do it, which just works amazingly. So. Um,
absolutely.
and that's what's so great about it as well. It's a problem solving kind of thing as well. So you've got your concept and you've got your sketch, and then you've really got to just you've got to figure it all out.
I wonder, how do you decide which works will be shadow boxes and which will be more traditional 2D works?
um, well, it, I'll just kind of say to myself that I want to do a shadow box.
And then you just find that
That's the
imagery.
idea, yeah. Or if I come up with an idea that I like Metamorphosis. If I come up with an idea that I think will work particularly well as a shadow box, I'll put it on the back burner and I'll wait until I start on the shadow box. But yeah, generally it'll be right. I'm gonna make another shadow box, and I start thinking about ideas that will suit that. Yeah.
It's funny because looking at your work, I think they all could make wonderful shadow boxes. I mean, the way that you were discussing Watcher and the Oak and how you have that branch caught right here in that antler, and then that other loose one in the foreground. Your work just, it's beautiful, whether it's in this fashion or in that shadow box fashion, but they all could, I think, do quite well either way, for
I
sure.
think yeah, they could all be split up. I think the if you look at the north wind again, I
Mm-hmm.
think the fluidity and movement of the wind itself, I wouldn't approach something like that as a shadow box just yet. I mean, I might do one day, um, but then the Watcher in the Oak would definitely work because it's solid lines, isn't it?
Yes.
When things are a bit more fluid, and I know the water is fluid in
I was going to say, the water almost
in
reminds me of the wind.
yeah, I see what you're saying, but there's definitely oh, I don't know. Yes, no, okay. There we go. Challenge accepted. My next shadow box will be a wind piece.
There you go. And I also want to point out on the pieces that do come from the publication itself how Adam has the title listed there, his signature and his name and the date, which I think is a really beautiful placement on the actual drawings. Whether you read that story or not, it's still quite a lovely and not so complicated design element that is of note. Yeah, you guys can see there too.
I've got each of them signed in the same way.
Yes.
Oh, hang on. You had the north wind there. Let me introduce you to the other winds.
Yeah, let's meet him.
This was one of the wonderful challenges about Tasha's book about A Stranger's Tale was the introduction of each of these winds, these characters. Um, so the north wind that you have with you, Erica, is he's this strong kind of from him I kind of got the idea that he was going to be this kind of old dude that lives in the mountain and hunts wolves and so so he was the first I worked on, and then I moved on to the other winds. And this chap here was a lot of fun. He's the east wind. And when you read the story, you realize he's a really trickster, kind of impish character with these winged arms. And if you could point to brambles on your end, Erica.
Yeah, I'm gonna go a little bit closer for that one.
Brambles is the introduction to this chap, to the east wind. So you can see the same setting there, the twisted brambles and the barbs and stuff. So brambles leads on to the stranger encountering this impish character. And again, the lighting is so weird in this video, but this is if you check it out on the site, you'll see it's got much more subtle, warm tones to it and stuff. I'm not sure how it's come across anyway. So that's the east wind. And then we move across to, I'll just pull this one over a sec. Okay, we've got the south wind here. Now this was a really lovely one to approach as well. She is described, as being much warmer, much kind of comforting. And I think this is why in the story she's, I think, the most dangerous wind of all of them. She tempts him with all sorts of material goods and whatnot, but she embraces him in this warm, cozy kind of flowing wind that instantly makes him feel comfort, where the situation he's in really isn't comfortable at all. So I think she's quite dangerous, but kind of warm and loving at the same time. There she is. And the final wind. Ooh, final wind, here she is. Now this is this is the west wind. This is a real turning point in the story. The stranger has all but given up at this point, as you can tell by this piece. And he's struggling, and once again the west wind she's tempting him in a very different way to the other winds, but again, kind of comforting in a way. It's you've got to read it.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's probably hard to go into it without giving the story away.
It is, but I also wanted to explain the different characters.
No, I think it's great because we did get a lot of questions once we started to send out the collection to our email list as far as what these images represented. Especially this one, actually. We had a number of questions asking because it does exhibit such sorrow and pain that it's imagery that people aren't used to seeing in your work often.
Yeah, he is. Like I said, he's all but ready to give up here, and she is tempting him to give up in a certain way. And one thing that that I chatted to Tash about that I really wanted to add was his wolf, the wolf that's on his cloak, who's accompanying with the story. If you can see the kind of protective growl that he's giving off in the direction of the wind. I thought that was really nice. So you've got on one side you've got the wind here coaxing him and trying to convince him. You've got him in complete despair, and then you've got the wolf here growling. So there's this kind of circular a circle of emotions going on with this piece that I was really chuffed with when I completed it.
Absolutely.
the true emotions of this scene will be made very clear to you all if you get a chance to read it, when you get a chance to read it.
Absolutely. I thought that I'd have more time because of not having to go to and from the gallery and all that, but it's almost as if I have less time now. And I don't know how that happened, as time seems to move even faster than normal. I think what's really great about these images particularly is that they tell their own stories independent of the actual writing. So if you don't get a chance to read them, there's still so much that can be interpreted and enjoyed from them without even knowing that they are a small part of a greater story. I think that's one of the beauties of narrative art, is that whether it's an intended story or one that's more open, or both, you always have such incredible interpretations that vary person to person. And there's one of the newer ones, Thistledown. Tell us about the title of your show, actually, Thistledown.
Thistledown at the top. Excuse me. All right. So yes, Thistledown, the title piece of the show as well. I just love Thistledown, basically. And I get the impression that it's something I've wanted to do for this particular plant is something that I've wanted to do for a very long time. I love showing things that are drifting off in the wind. I love a wind-swept piece. So this was just a perfect subject matter for me. Again, I hope the lighting's all right on your end, guys. But there we go. You can see down the bottom there, Thistledown fairy.
Yeah.
With her dress made up of thistles.
You do have the tendency to like to hide figures or characters in your work.
Absolutely, yeah. And going back to the question you asked about the books, there was a series called The Woodland Folk that I loved when I was a kid, and it was about gnomes and elves that live in this woods. And every piece, there was just so much to delve into and to look at, and I just get lost in that for hours when I was a kid. And I think it was always an ambition of mine to kind of to create that. And
Adam, you're a little muffled now.
Oh, sorry. Am I covering the mic?
I think you are, but no, you're clear now. Sorry.
So yeah, it was always an ambition of mine to do that, to hide all of these elements in pieces. I mean, I'll show you Shay Seren in a bit if you'd like.
Yeah.
Another of the show, because that's a perfect example of that. There she is. Okay, and over here we've got Shay Seren. Now this is a really lovely personal story for me. This is the protagonist you can see here is my little girl Nova. And this was directly led on from our last chat we had, Erica. I hope they're watching now, but somebody asked if I ever use pictures of my kids to reference. And it got me thinking. I had tried in the past, and I just thought, well, I should really give that a go again. So so this is Nova. I tried looking through our photographs from the woods, but nothing was seeming quite right. So she actually posed for this for me, and that's her dress and everything.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and the title Shay Seren. So in the woodlands near our house. We were all on a walk one day and we came across this tree which had the words Shay Seren carved into it, and Nova asked me what it was. So I said it's well, obviously it's the gateway to the magical world of Shay Seren. So we climbed through its branches, because that's how you get into the other world, and we all had a really lovely adventure where there were dragons, trolls, invisible creatures trying to pull her off into the woods. Actually, there was a lot of invisible creatures there, funnily enough. And every time we've headed back to the woods since, we've gone to the Shay Seren tree and gone on an adventure in the other world. So this is one of those pieces. The story, the themes, the subject matter are extremely personal to me. But it's also one of those pieces that we were just talking about, where you have the hidden things. So there are a number of hidden forest spirits within this piece, and I'd love to know how many people could find, because there's quite a few in there.
I think
Um,
someone, as I corresponded, had come up with 12 so far.
ah,
So we'll
so
see.
close. Yeah, no, there's 13.
I actually, when I emailed it out, I had put underneath the image itself, you know, I had admitted how many there were and asked if they had been able to count them all. It's
Well,
something that can be bypassed accidentally. And so,
yeah. Well, I feel I always throw something in that I know is going to be extremely difficult to find. So there is one that's a bit more tricky than others.
that's probably that last one that the number 12
Yeah,
finder could
yeah.
not locate.
Maybe I should just say there's 14 to really mess with people.
I was gonna say that would really drive somebody crazy. We have a collector who, when we're open at the gallery, he's someone who always seems to find hidden faces in work that does not hold any of that intentionally. But he just is able to look at the landscape or the water or whatever it is in that piece and see things in there. And so I think that he would have really gotten a kick out of this one.
Oh, nice. There we go.
What I love too is that it makes you look at the work for a lot longer than you normally would too.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. If you're trying to find something, you'll study it in great detail, won't you?
But it's also one of those gifts that keep giving because the work itself is just so beautiful on its own, whether you realize or not that the forest spirits are there. And then over time, perhaps more will turn up and
If you
that piece will
notice.
grow with you.
I've got, say, one of my older pieces. Have you seen my piece Hummingbird?
I don't know. Let me see the image. By title, I probably won't recall.
Oh, I don't have it here because
Oh,
it's
you
it's
don't.
longer.
Ah,
It's an older one, but it's a piece of a hummingbird feeding off a flower on a tree, on a blossom tree. And I had the first time I posted it, I didn't mention the hidden fairies that were in there. And then I posted it again, and I said, "How many could you find?" And like maybe three or four people got back saying, "Oh my God, I love this piece," and I hadn't even noticed them.
yeah. It, you
But
know,
there
it,
was there's about nine or so hidden in there, so it's quite fun to mess with people like that.
Absolutely. I think we're all in so much of a rush now, and especially with social media, forgetting about even going into a gallery and seeing the work. We're just scrolling through images so quickly
Oh,
that
yeah.
it's worse than people walking past artwork in museums or galleries after only a couple of seconds. And so it's
Yeah,
great that you're stopping them and you're forcing them to kind of figure
yeah,
something out.
that's the goal, I guess, for all of us, isn't
Yep.
it?
Yeah, for sure. And so what other works do we have by you to take a look at?
Let's have a look. So I've got two more shadow boxes.
Yep.
Um, well, I thought this technically isn't part of the exhibition, but it is part of the collection, and I thought I'd give you a quick look at this. This is from A Stranger's Tale.
Oh, we didn't get to see
Um,
her. You hid her from me.
that's because this belongs to Natasha. So
Ah!
yeah, it was part of the deal was she'd basically. But I said, if you let me illustrate your story, you get to choose one of the pieces.
Ah. And the framing is
And
just beautiful too.
this was the piece she chose, called "The
It's gorgeous.
Embrace."
Look at that.
And again, you've got the wind motions going through there and stuff as he's turning into mist. Not to give anything away. All right, so
So
up here we've got
that's the only other image that we haven't seen then from A Stranger's Tale.
yes, yeah, I think so.
And here's
Right,
one of
so
my
here's
other favorites, the Warren.
again, it's out of its mount at the moment, and it's not layered up, but you can get. I think there's some pretty nice shadows being cast there. You can get an idea. So here we've got a little sleeping kind of protagonist there with her lantern in her cave. And once this is all up, there's a lot of depth to these warrens, to each tunnel. You can see. I mean, I'm just holding this up a little bit, and you can see that rabbit back there. How much
Yep.
shadow is cast on him.
Those
So
little
you get a real
burrows.
sense of depth in each of these warrens.
Yeah, this one's
Uh,
exceptional.
this
Temp
is very much. This is very much Watership Down inspired. One of my favourite books as a kid. You can see Fiver and Hazel
You
hanging
know,
out
it's
at the
so
top.
funny again because Calvin has a piece in his collection that's inspired by Watership Down also.
Oh, really? Oh,
So
wonderful.
there's too many
I
weird
feel like I'm going to
parallels
like this
now.
thing.
And
It's actually that would be one of my dream projects to illustrate that book, actually.
he would do a wonderful job too. And so this shadow box has 10 layers, right?
This is a 10 layer. This is one of my largest. Uh, my largest shadow box. I think you know Kim, but one of my largest shadow box belongs to Kim Curry Feister. Hi Kim, if you're listening. And
Oh,
it was commissioned from her, and it's of a redwood treehouse forest. And this is only slightly smaller than that, with I think one less layer. But this is yeah. So this and the redwood forest are my largest shadow boxes. And again, it's such a challenge working on shadow boxes as it is. But to then to work on one so big as well, that you really get lost in it, and you really get lost in the direction of each of the warrens. And so again, when this is layered, you can look around corners and you can find hidden rabbits in places and stuff. So I mean, I think
absolutely.
the rabbits on this piece that you can't even see when it's like this because they're kind of behind certain layers and stuff. So yeah, it's really fun to think about these in that way.
I think a beautiful aspect about this piece too is your use of light. So with the girl sleeping holding her lantern, when you know you guys see the JPEGs and who you know spoke for this work in person too get to see it. There's a light that seems to emanate, and it just glows quite a bit. It feels like it's almost a real light, and I think it's quite lovely.
Yeah, yeah, she is.
Okay, you guys
So
can
again,
see that.
that's all built through that light is all built through watercolor, and just the white of the paper as well. So whereas everything else is quite heavily with the greens and the browns and all of that, you get really drawn into that, really drawn into the warmth of her little chamber.
Absolutely.
There you go. And the final one, I think I showed you last week. Let me just piece this together for you. So we've got this piece here, which is called The Trail.
Oh wow. Yep. It's cool to see
The,
them like this. It really is because I think it allows more understanding of the layers.
so again, each layer of this is an element of woodland, really. So there you got that, and then the second layer has her and her tree. It's quite nice framing the rest of the artwork with them, actually. There we go. And this is 6 layers, and again, when you've got the depth of the frame, you really get to go into those woods and follow that path into the depth of it.
Absolutely. Adam, we're going to be cut off in a moment. So I'm going to close this one out and come back on. Just
Okay,
come
no
back and join
worries.
me and we'll finish talking about her as well as the exhibition. And we also have a question that we'll get to then too. So we'll be right back. I'll see you all
See you
in
in
a
a sec.
second. Hey again.
Hey, we're back. How you doing?
We are back. So again, everyone, we're here with Adam Oehlers talking about his exhibition, Thistledown. And we'll, yeah, keep talking. So there was a question about your inspiration, but we can address that as we maybe continue looking at that last shadow box.
Oh, you want to see? Okay. I'm just going to place you down here a second on the table while I put it together properly with its mount because
Definitely.
you get a better feel of the depth when it's got its black mount around it as well. Right, let me flip you around.
Here we go.
So, so yeah, again, this is a very story-driven piece for me. this is all taken directly from those old fairy tale roots of a kid or a girl being lost in the woods. This particular piece, she's actually found a path to follow, and she has companions in the birds, the doves that are sitting on her shoulder there. So she's got this kind of tentative walk through the woods. She's not sure what's coming, but she's being brave, and she's heading forward anyway. Yeah.
And why did you choose doves to accompany her?
Well, it was more of an aesthetic thing rather than a story-driven thing. When it's all layered up properly, the depth brings out a lot of shadows and a lot of darkness. So everything gets a whole lot darker, and the white birds really jump out once it's. Let me see if I can lift this up for you. Hang on. The white birds really jump out when there's dark shadows behind. So it was the choice of the doves was an aesthetic thing rather than a story-driven one.
I think your work also embodies a lot of hope, a lot of challenging situations that, if pursued, will result in, I think, something quite lovely and exciting. And it harks back to, of course, when you're a child and you're more prone to explore and your imagination goes a bit more wild. But I think that the message behind Doves is quite relevant as she embarks deeper into these woods.
Yeah, but it's also the companionship of it, isn't it? The not being alone,
Mm-hmm.
the having something to comfort you in a strange place.
Absolutely. And when you're young, you find companionship in everything, in the flowers, in the animals, in the trees. You're a bit more
So,
creative with your friendship.
yeah, I remember having a pet rock.
Yes, see? We all had our imaginary friends, and of course, our friends that existed, but probably really weren't our friends.
Yeah. So there we go. Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to have a closer look at?
If anybody did want to see anything else, now is the time to tell us. But I think we went through quite a number of pieces. I would like to also just talk about your framing a little bit because it's always so impressive. I know we mentioned it last time too, but Adam always does such a beautiful job picking out the frames and using double mats, such as what we have here with the North Wind, to frame his work. The Watcher and the Oak and Weather Acne.
I
And
think
another.
I've got a very specific style of frame that I'm drawn to, and my framer, he's a lovely chap. He's constantly trying to get me to mix it up a bit, but it's the thicker black frames, that little hint of gold that you can see on those ones, or the intricate kind of intricate details around the edge of the frame. They're the ones that I really love. So.
Usually I'm a bit more partial to ornate frames, but I think that there's just something so handsome and bold about these frames, and they suit your work so well that every time I open up pieces as they arrive to the gallery, I'm so happy with them. I think that they do such a great service, and your framer does an excellent job too.
Those
But
eyes are
I don't mind if you stay with the same frames. We've never had a complaint either.
Well, the frames I've got lined up for the shadow boxes, I think you're going to like them then as well. The outer edge is very similar to those of the Stranger's Tale collection, but they're just so much deeper. So you've got this kind of excuse the mess in the background there. You've got this kind of detail on the shadow box ones, but
Yeah.
they're just this is what there's no depth on this frame really, but yeah, they've got a really lovely depth to them as well. So
There are some very lucky collectors out there who will be getting their shadow boxes sent over to them as soon as that
yes.
framer opens up.
So yeah, these are the pieces I've got with me.
Yep. So as you guys may already know, once Adam's framer does open, the works will be framed. And most of the shadow boxes are already spoken for, but Metamorphosis, which is the bird within the sea right over here that we spoke about earlier, that is one of the only ones left. Similarly, a lot of these pieces have been spoken for. The ones that I'm showing you on top, for instance, Watcher in the Oak is still looking for a home, as well as the North Wind. But I believe that all the other pieces that I do have here have been spoken for already. So if you guys would like a list of available
Sorry, one
books,
second.
I can always send that to you too.
There we go. I'll just give you a bit more details of the.
Yeah, the feathers are just really gorgeous there.
There we go.
I think his expression also. I mean, oftentimes your girls are not facing the viewer, so
Yeah.
the expression is not too telling. You have to perhaps look more at the body, the posture, gestures, things like that, to get a greater understanding of that protagonist's place and interpretation of the occurring experience. But in your animals, like I'd say the owl here, and of course, you know, the bird within the ocean there, there's a bit more of an expression that's being told. Let me see if I
Yeah.
have anyone else here. No, I think these are the two best examples.
I
Yeah,
think when it comes to the animal pieces, we I think we admire and appreciate animals on a very different level. So when the focus is an animal, you look at it in a very different way to when it's a human protagonist. And like you said, you might not place yourself in a scene like Watcher in the Oak quite as much as you would say Chez Seren. But yeah, you appreciate it from a different point of view, really, don't you? More as maybe more of an observational point of view.
absolutely. And I think that, you know, going back to the female protagonists that you often create, sometimes you do see a bit more of their faces, but your stylized approach to depicting them, I think, really allows for that, again, that anonymity that I'd mentioned last time we spoke, where anyone can see someone they know within these young girls. I mean, they can see themselves at a younger age, their daughters, their nieces, their granddaughters, you know, and so I think that opens up such a world of connection.
Oh, it's
And
nice to see Arachne again. She was one of the first I made for the show, wasn't
yeah,
she? Well, that was a while ago now.
he's quite wonderful too. You can kind of see his curiosity.
The funnest part about this piece was playing around with the cobwebs and the positioning of of these spider webs leading into her dress and into her hair and stuff. That was but again it was because it was dealing with spiders and spider webs that these things have a reputation, don't they? And I wanted to take and I wanted to make it into something beautiful, and I wanted it to. I didn't want there to be a kind of anything threatening about the piece. I didn't want anything to be irksome.
Now, did you hide a spider anywhere? Because I think the presence of a spider would maybe add to that for some people.
Do you think I did? Did I? I feel like I should have.
Just hidden someplace.
I'm gonna say yes, Erica. You can find it later. All right.
As I slowly go crazy looking for that spider. I mean, spider webs has its almost magical look to them anyway. It's just when they have a spider accompanying them, sometimes they get a bit more weary for some. But I mean, the way they catch the water
Which is so
droplets
odd,
after a
isn't it?
rain.
You can appreciate the beauty of a spider web, but then there's a spider on it, and you freak out. But
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
such a weird contradiction. Yeah.
isn't it? But I think they're quite beautiful. And how did you depict the webs? What medium is it that makes them stand so much more opaquely?
So I used this was one of the first pieces I experimented with this actually. It was a oh, what's it called? A gum pen. So a masking pen. So you can get masking pens with a nice thin point. Where is it? Oh, here we go. So it comes with a nice thin point, so you can draw on your details. You got to do this before you do anything else, and then once it sets, you can work your watercolor over the top of it. And then the most satisfying feeling is when you use this little thing to remove the gum from the paper, and you suddenly see all these details jump out at you. I used the same thing here for
For shades,
the
right?
details in the sky of Chez Seren. I used it to create uh, these flying dandelions in the sky of Thistledown.
So it comes up thick and then it's removed until.
Yeah, it's a gum. So it's a gum, so it protects that part of the paper from having any watercolor attached to it, and then you simply lift it off, and it's left with that lovely crisp white, which is I've done a few pieces with frost as well. It works really nicely for frost and creating that kind of snowy thing. Oh, and I used it in Sleeping Giants, in the sky of Sleeping Giants. If you head up to the sky, to the stars.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go.
It's
And
interesting because it just blends in so nicely. I'm sorry, the glare. We have the skylights and the light is strong right now, so we're getting all that green glare from it for some
I
reason.
used
But
it in a slightly different way. Let me flip you around again. I used it in a slightly different way for Thistledown. Let's see if I can find a good. Is this lighting any good?
I mean,
Okay.
it's we can make it out. It's not as strong
Okay.
as
If you look at
color.
do you see these little details on the leaves?
Oh yeah, we can see that there.
Little highlights. Okay, so with Thistledown, what I did was coated pretty much everything that I wanted highlighted. I used the gum pen, and then I took it all off, and I left all of these completely white. But then I worked over these areas again with another wash, and then I just kept working and working and working. So these highlights that you can make out on leaves. They were all done in the first stage with the gum strip, but then some areas have had maybe 4 or 5 extra pieces of extra layers of watercolor added on top.
Ah.
So it's yeah, and it's something that's I'm still quite new to, but I'm really having a lot of fun playing around with it.
Well, I'm glad for that. I'm really enjoying how they come out too. They look so easy, but there's just so much more to them, and it's so great that we can have this conversation. So not only
Yeah,
myself, but everyone watching can learn a bit more about that process and the medium too.
yeah. It's nice to be able to. Yeah. I'd say play around with it because it's really fun. Even if you just want to create shapes and do a watercolor wash and then take off the gum strip, it's just really satisfying.
It
So
sounds like it. I've always loved when, just as a kid, when you were able to put all that Elmer's glue on your hand and just peel it off after it had
yeah,
dried.
yeah.
It just makes me think of that. So we had one last question, and then we'll start to wrap it up. The last question is just kind of expanding upon your inspiration behind why you create the work that you do.
Uh-huh. Oh, just expand on it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the question's kind of far up now.
Um,
Let me see if I
yeah,
can find it again.
I think it's an escapism for me, really. It's getting lost in a story, getting lost in another world, getting yeah, just escaping from the grind. Do you know what I
No,
mean?
and I think that the people
These,
who collect and enjoy your
these
work, they have that experience too. Your work brings them back to their childhood or to some place new.
Yeah, lovely. I mean, that's the overall goal, for me. That's what I strive to do. Uh, but on a personal level, it's just yeah, it's just getting out of here. It's going for a walk in the woods. It's getting lost in the countryside. It's uh, when I'm working on a piece like Chez Seren or Thistledown or any of them really. It's that's what it is. It's going to another world really. Yeah.
I mean, I grew up always loving fantasy books and movies and just stories that transported you and made you forget about the reality that you were in because they were told so well and visually they were portrayed so imaginative. Oh,
Got
oh,
me.
now I'm echoing,
Oh,
I think.
now I'm echoing, I think.
Do I echo on your end?
Do I echo on your end?
Oh, you're not echoing on my end, no, but
It's
you
just
just
weird.
you totally disappeared for a second, but
Oh,
I've got you back now.
okay. I was
Okay,
just
I
gonna
was
say
just
that
gonna
growing
say
up,
that
I always
I
took to these
always took
stories
to these
also,
stories
whether they
also,
were in
whether
books
they were in
or
books
movies.
or movies.
And so that
And
ability
so
to
that
kind of
ability
leave
to
the
kind of
world
leave
and
the
the
world
reality
and the
that you're
reality
in
that you're in
was always so
was
Yeah.
always
wonderful
so
to me.
wonderful to me.
And still
And
today
still
is.
today is.
And it's through
Yeah,
the
And
oh,
it's through the
characters
absolutely.
characters.
I find it really, really important, especially the state of the world at the moment, to be able
absolutely.
Absolutely.
to be able to go to a lovely magical place is it's never been more more needed, has it?
I
I
agree.
agree.
It's always been
It's
an
always been an
escape
escape for me too.
So
So I'm
always attracted
always
and
attracted to and appreciative
to artists like you
who
who
offer that for me.
Oh, lovely.
So
So okay,
I'm
I'm echoing. It's
I don't know if
anyone on the viewer end is hearing it,
but
I'm gonna start to wrap things up now.
I don't want this
When we record this
for YouTube
where
Yeah, you've got. I can hear a bit of an echo for you. So yeah.
it's a little strange. I'm sorry about that,
everyone.
But
Adam's work
is now
viewable online.
So if you
just go to havenartgallery.com
under
under our current shows,
you'll see him
listed there.
and
I can always send you more information or images
and videos
if you like.
And
other than that,
Adam's available
for questions too.
Yeah, if you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to send them through. Find me on Instagram and I'll get back to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Adam.
For that.
And so
thank you for completing such an exceptional body of work.
I'm excited.
Give one last
to
look
share
at this
it on
one. Yeah.
social media.
And thank you
guys for joining.
And
we'll chat again soon.
Thank you so much, Erica. It's been lovely chatting to you as always.
It's been great on mine. Thank you
so much.
And thanks to everyone who tuned in. It's been lovely seeing all your comments.
Absolutely.
Say hi to Nam.
Oh, I will do.
We'll
talk soon.
Chat soon, Erica. Take it easy.
Bye.
Bye.